Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I am your host for the next 2 hours. Is going to be information and woo-packed radio right here on TFR Live, Truth Frequency Radio, home to, I would say, all of the best shows in the alternative media. Not that I'm biased at all in any way, but I want to thank all of you for tuning in, all the Wookiees that are filing into the chat room over at tfrlive.com/chat. iHeartRadio people, TuneIn Radio, and people on the TFR Live YouTube channel. All of you very, very welcome here today. And you'll be pleased to know that I have got one of our very own on the show to get into another of my favourite topics tonight. And it's fast becoming maybe my favourite topic. But we'll get there in just a moment. And today, wow, I was topping up on the old vitamin D intake. Yes, I was being a bit rebellious. I am longer than my allotted yard time that I get off the government. You know how the world's changed now. I used to be like some kind of sunflower out the back. I would lie there from the morning right up until the sun went down. But obviously now things are a little bitty different. You know, you got people looking at the curtains, making sure you're not spending too much time having fun outside. But I'm very pleased to say, for the start of May over here in Scotland, having heat like we had today, you can definitely tell it's the apocalypse when it's hot like that. But with that out of the way, and I am feeling slightly pink, slightly tender. I don't usually burn, but that's an indication of the unseasonably hot weather we were having here today. And isn't it typical? Especially if you're in Scotland, you'll know what I mean. We're the kind of country where all of the children get 7 weeks off during the summer. It probably rains for the majority of those 7 weeks. And then the day the kids go back to school, that's when the sun comes out. And that's usually the luck we get over here. And wouldn't it just be typical in the one summer in most of our lives that we've ever spent under these current conditions, or, you know, lockdown, we're probably going to get the best summer on record. That's the kind of luck we have here in Scotland. But less of that and more about tonight's show. And I think this is the perfect show to follow up from last night's Oak Island special, because The Curse of Oak Island, obviously a very popular show on the History Channel, and the same team that make that have also started a new show called The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. And oh my, if you haven't checked this out yet, you really, really must. And for anyone who doesn't know, Skinwalker Ranch, which is also known as the Sherman Ranch, is a property that's located approximately 512 acres southeast of Bullard, Utah, Utah State, that is reputed to be the site of paranormal and UFO and so much more strange activity. Now, the name Skinwalker itself, as we're going to learn further tonight, comes from the Navajoe legend, and it involves a shaman, it involves a whole load of woo. And to help me get into all of this tonight, like I say, we've got one of our own. Now, this is a person who's been a long-time listener to the show, long-time supporter of the show as well. And we must have maybe made contact with each other, started talking to each other maybe a couple of years ago. We've always had a back and forth, and they've come to me with stuff, and sometimes I'll go to them. But usually we just end up having a laugh and, you know, goofing off and not taking things too seriously. Because I think we can all agree the world is a little bit serious right now, right? That's why I'm really enjoying getting into topics like Oak Island and, like I say tonight, Skinwalker Ranch. So who is with me? I hear you all asking. Well, it's our very own Billijo. Billijo, welcome to the Kev Baker Show at long, long last. Now, you may be muted up, Billy. You may be muted up. You might have to press the microphone button on your Skype. Can I unmute it from here? There we go.
Okay, I think I got it. I think I got it.
How you
Thanks for
doing?
having me on, Kev. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing really good. And like I say, I always enjoy hanging out with our listeners. I find the audience, you lot probably know a heck of a lot more than me. Usually, what we find is we share this common love, enthusiasm for all of the strange stuff, all of the woo, as I call it. And I have to thank you right off the bat because it was you that said to me, you said, Kev, have you started watching The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch? And I remember seeing the trailer and I thought, no, you know what? I'd forgotten all about that. And I tell you what, wow. It's the first time myself and my son have had some father son woo time. He's absolutely blown away by this show. But before we get into the show in depth, I know you've been looking into Skinwalker Ranch. And the name itself, very interesting, comes from the Navajoe. Talk to us about the history of Skinwalker, Billy.
Well, they call it Skinwalker Ranch because that whole area, it's called the Uinta Valley, and the Ute Indians live there, and the Ute Indians and the Navajo Indians, they were kind of like rival tribes, and they did a lot of fighting, and the Ute would actually capture the Navajo and sell them to the Mexicans for slaves. Um, so because of all of that, excuse me, the Navajo cursed the land and the people with the skinwalker. And in the skinwalker culture, a skinwalker is a type of harmful witch that is able to turn into possess or disguise themselves as an animal. They're usually medicine men or women who choose to do evil with their powers. Um, Other tribes like the Pueblo, the Apache, the Hopi, and the Ute all have their own versions of the Skinwalker. But since this is a Navajo curse, we'll kind of go along with what their beliefs are. It's believed that these witches respected healers and spiritual guides that later on chose to use their powers for evil stuff. And to become a skinwalker, they needed to do really evil deed, and typically it was kill a family member like a sibling. This gives them the ability to shapeshift into animals, and they're usually seen as coyotes, wolves, foxes, cougars, dogs, and bears. Um, Lots of times they're where the skin of the animals they transform into, and that usually depends on the ability that they need for whatever kind of havoc they want to wreak, I guess. Sometimes they also wear the animal skulls and antlers to gain more power. Some of the powers they have is like reading minds, controlling thoughts and behaviors, causing illness and disease, destroying property, and even death. People who witness skinwalkers say that some of the ways to know a skinwalker is there is they get noises around the house, like knocking on windows, banging on walls, scraping sounds on the roof. They've been seen peering through windows and show up in front of vehicles in hopes of causing accidents. And later on, we'll get into a lot of the stuff that happened to the Sherman family, but a couple of these things are indeed what did happen to them. In recent times, most stories don't talk about death and illness. It's more like a trickster-like activity that really happened to the Shermans. And
Yeah, the
they were the
Shermans,
owners
yeah, they
before
really did.
Bigelow.
They had a really hard time, Billy, didn't they? I
Oh,
mean,
they did.
yeah, I
They
mean,
were terrorized by whatever was going on there.
and some of the stories, I mean, I'm sure you've got some of them there, but some of the ones I was reading, and there's one that they talk about on the show about a big giant wolf type creature. I
Yeah, that's
mean,
an interesting story.
yeah, why don't you tell us that one? Because that's it really gives a good kind of taste. The Shermans, and I think it was Terry and Gwen Sherman, if I remember correctly, right?
Well, there were a few of them out there, but I think it was Terry and his son. And it was actually on the first day that they moved into the ranch. And they were unpacking their stuff, and they had some calves over in a corral. And they noticed off in the distance there's this big wolf like dog out there. And the dog just, casually strolls over to them and actually is interacting like it's a pet dog. Um, it's kind of going in and out of the people, and they even I think it was Terry that petted them, and they said that the dog smelled like even like a wet dog because it was kind of a misty day there, I guess, that day. Um, so the wolf goes over to the calf corral and grabs a hold of the snout on one of the calves and tries pulling it through the corral. Well, Terry and his son start beating on this wolf with sticks, and it's not even phasing it. So Terry goes and gets his 357 Magnum, which is it's a pretty powerful handgun, and comes at this wolf and ends up shooting it, and nothing. It's still trying to pull this calf out, and he shoots him 3 more times and nothing happens. Then he goes in and gets his 30-06, which is a pretty big hunting rifle, and he shoots it with the 30-06, and that kind of gets the wolf's attention. He lets go of the calf and just kind of stares at them. So Terry shoots this wolf again, and it kind of goes through him and leaves like fur and skin and stuff on the ground, but the wolf isn't bleeding at all from any of these gunshot wounds. So it just kind of starts strolling off or whatever. And so I think it was Terry and his son, they start tracking this wolf, and they could see like the paw prints because it was all wet and muddy. And they follow it for probably almost a mile over towards like this brook area. And then all of a sudden the footsteps just stop. It's like this wolf just vanished. And now they say the wolf was like up to Terry's chest. It was really, really big. And what's weird about that is a few days later, his wife Gwen was driving home, and she gets to the gate and she sees this big, huge wolf. And this thing is tall enough to, the back of it was to the top of her car window. And it was with some weird looking dog with this like big head. She's never seen anything like it before. And I guess later on they have this lineup of these different wolves and, different species or breeds of wolf and stuff. And the one that they ended up identifying this as was actually a dire wolf. And dire wolves have been extinct for 10,000 years.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that's what the first thing I thought when I heard the story was immediately with how big it was dire wolf. From watching Game of Thrones, they all had the dire wolves.
Yep. And it does make you wonder, if it was anywhere else in the world, it would probably be really, really weird. But when you find out that's going on at Skinwalker Ranch, and if you've got a kind of knowledge of what does go on there, it's probably the one place in the world where you can, I can see that happening. And this whole Skinwalker, the whole curse thing, I mean, how much do you think that plays into what some people experience today, Billy?
I think a lot of it does. And, it's just kind of hard to tell because there's just so many different things that are happening from different sectors of the paranormal between, the curse, other paranormal activity, the UFO activities. But I think a lot of it still plays in today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with the battles that were fought there as well, it does kind of make you wonder, some of the paranormal activity that's there. And we'll get into some of the paranormal activity that they're literally experiencing right now at Skinwalker. Another story I found, and it comes from Coast to Coast, and it's another kind of account of something beyond weird, okay? And it says here, in 2004, on a July episode of Coast to Coast, we have a witness who says that he heard about encounters in 2013 at none other than the very odd and much talked about Skinwalker Ranch. Now, he rambles on about UFO sightings in the area he had heard of from some of the native kids, and then hits with quite a bizarre one, telling of one series of very intriguing events that started with some kids out having a good time and seeing a strange light in the sky. Now, that's important. That's quite interesting, the light in the sky, because some of the encounters of the story that Billy went over there, when the dog, the paw prints kind of disappear, I was reading one today where it was talking about blue and orange lights appearing in the sky and almost like UFO activity occurring at the time this dog disappeared. So we've got these lights again, possibly the same thing. And the caller goes on to say, then it had an even brighter light and it went over their truck. And these kids, well, something hit their truck. These kids got scared, so they went down the road to the main road and got out, which is, I'm guessing, about 3/4 of a mile. And they got out to look at the damage done to this truck. And for some reason, the driver decided to be the passenger, and the passenger was the driver. Now, apparently, there are some girls with them in this truck. And well, once they got back in the truck, this is where it gets very unbelievable. A creature grabbed this driver, and now the passenger, and pulled him out of the truck. It threw him around like a rag doll, bit him bit him on the butt several times and clawed him. Now, long story short, somehow this kid got back in the truck, and one of the kids took a picture of the creature. They got scared, and they were able to get back in their truck. And I mean, they drove down the road, talked to the youth Indian police because it's a youth territory over there. And the youth Indian police say that there's nothing we can do about it because they are very well aware of the Skinwalker Ranch. So the next day, which would be the Sunday, they contacted my UFO relative, and he went down there to investigate. So meanwhile, there was a shaman's wife, and the shaman was there blessing the kids that were involved in this. Now, my UFO relative said that he saw the picture on the cell phone of this creature, and he also saw the damage done to the truck. There was also scratched into the truck the word die. And he also saw the damage done to this kid and the bite marks. Now, that was a very unbelievable for me to hear. And the crazy thing about it is, a few months ago, I work at the hospital, and one of my patients was actually the shaman's wife. And she was the one that was also there at the time. My relative was there to investigate. She told me exactly what my relative said, but in greater detail. The creature that she described, and also my relative said, had to be a tall creature because he would hold this kid out of the window. And that's the 8-foot tall truck. And this creature had horns. It had red hair. It had a human like face, but its mouth was distorted. And it came out kind of looking like a wolf, claws, and it had a bat wings. So my question is to you, and I asked my UFO relative, that's a really cruel way to describe one of your family, but they're going with it. Is it the Skinwalker? And he goes, no, this is something totally different. And I asked also the shaman's wife, and she agreed it was, again, something totally different. And there's that many things, Billy, I think, going on at the Skinwalker Ranch that it has to make it one of the most supernatural, paranormal hotspots anywhere in the world, right?
Well, Skinwalker Ranch is the number one, like, scientifically investigated UFO hotspot in the world. But I wonder what that was, because that shows a lot of factors into being a skinwalker, with the horns and the 8-foot tall, and
It certainly
I'm kind of
ticks a lot of the,
curious as to what they think it might be.
yeah, it certainly ticks a lot of the boxes. I mean, the article here, it includes one of the generic pictures of
Yeah.
Baphomet, and but I don't know, it's just, again, it's another one of these real weird kind of encounters. Now, what else was going on with the shaman and things back at the time when all this curse got put on the land? Do you know any more about that, Billy?
Well, I don't really know what was going on with the shaman themselves, but I think it just pretty much had to do with all the bad stuff the Ute Indians were doing to the Navajos, because they had a pretty tumultuous relationship with each other. The Ute Indians actually went with the U.S. Army. I think it was the U.S. Army during the Civil War, not the Civil War. I can't remember exactly what war, but they teamed up.
Yeah, I can't remember what war it was, but they almost collaborated, didn't they?
Yeah, they did collaborate and, captured a lot of the Navajo and actually forced the Navajo off of their land.
Wow.
So there's a lot of bad stuff that the Ute Indians did to the Navajos, and that was their retribution. I mean, they take this so seriously that they will not step foot on Skinwalker Ranch, because the ridge that they always show on the show, they say is the actual path of the Skinwalker, and they want absolutely nothing to do with it. And you can't get any of the Native Americans, whether it be Navajo or the Ute, to even talk about the Skinwalker, because they think it's going to bring that to them. So they won't even talk about it. And they have to be very trusting of you to talk about it, what little bit they will.
Yeah, I mean, that shows you the kind of the weight that they put behind this. And I'm not going to call it a myth. I'm going to call it, fact. There's obviously
Yeah.
something there that roams that land. And, you can go to today's show, the show we keep referring to, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And one of the people there that Brandon Fugel, now he's the billionaire tech mogul that now owns the ranch. He's got a team of people there, and I think it's the superintendent, the kind of guy that looks over the place. And in the very first episode, he's talking about a kind of encounter he has up on the ridge, up on the mesa, and red eyes, big red eyes, just staring
Mhm.
back at him. And when I hear about the red eyes, Billy, and when I add it to what we heard there in that story I read out, the wings and things,
Yeah.
it's almost a Mothman type thing going on here.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing, the red eyes. I'm trying to think who it was. I think it was a couple of the investigators that they were on the team with Robert Bigelow's team. The NIDS team.
Ned's, yeah, that's it, yeah.
Okay. We'll talk about them later, I'm sure, but they're the ones that came with Robert Bigelow to investigate the ranch and stuff. And they heard some cattle making some noises and stuff. And so they went out to investigate. I'm sorry, no, I know who it was now. It was Terry and his son. They went out to investigate why the cattle were all, making all these noises. It was the middle of the night. And under a tree over by where the cattle were, there was this round thing that they said kind of looked like a bear. It was, furry, but it was like round. And they ended up shooting at it, and it just kind of like dissipated. It just disappeared in a puff. And they look up, and there's this creature up in the tree with red eyes. And they shoot at it. The thing jumps down off of the tree and leaves one footprint. And it was a big clawed footprint.
Oh, that story we had there was a big claw that had scratched at one of the boys as well.
Yeah.
Oh, ho, ho, ho.
Yeah, but there's another red-eyed creature sighting.
And when we come back after the break, we're going to get more into the Shermans, some of the stuff that they were experiencing, cattle mutilations, UFOs, you name it. And keep listening, folks, because myself and Billy, before the show, we were kind of knocking things back and forth. And I was saying to her, I don't know, it's something about this show. I think there's something really significant about it. And as we progress later on in the show, we'll lay out what we may be going on in the background. And it's really, really significant, folks. In fact, it could be highly significant. So you'll need to keep listening for that. But Billy, I caught last night's episode. We're about to go to the break now, but I don't know how many episodes of this show that they have actually got scheduled. And
Hopefully a lot.
I was saying to you beforehand, I mean, Oak Island, it's, wow, you can't talk highly enough about that. But 5 episodes into Skinwalker, and I know it's the same production team, it's the same guy with a cool voiceover as well. And I think, if it keeps going the way it's going, for me personally, it could start to be better than Oak Island.
I totally agree. And like I told you, with these other shows like Oak Island, they've been at it for years and find things here and there, and it's kind of slow. But with Skinwalker Ranch, within the first episode, they were finding evidence of something going on there. And the more the show progresses, the bigger things they find and the more significant it becomes. It's crazy.
It is. I'm so stoked to have Billy here with me. This is great. It's really it's taking a liberty to call this a radio show. It's more like having a conversation with a friend, with lots
Absolutely.
of friends. Yeah, because I know, Billy, you love hanging out in the chat room. We've got a good family here. Again, I want to thank all of you for tuning in today. And tomorrow night on the show, in a slight change to our usual monthly visit by Bill Bean, we've got not one, but 2 people coming onto the show to talk about their experiences with the paranormal. It's a husband and wife couple that will be coming onto the show tomorrow. And we are going to raise the bar again for the woo tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Billijo is with me today to go over the secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. From the Skinwalker itself all the way to UFOs, and think of every type of woo that comes in between. Well, Skinwalker Ranch, it's got it. In spades, it truly has. And we're going to talk more about the actual current series that's on as we go further into the show. But we really need to look back at some of the people who have owned this property in more recent times. And I think we mentioned the Shermans during the last segment when we were talking about this crazy story with this dog wolf type entity. And I call it an entity because dogs and wolves that I know don't just disappear and vanish. They don't take 6 shots from a magnum either. So this was something totally different. When Terry and Gwen Sherman owned the ranch, and they bought it in 1984. They lasted until 1992. And I say they lasted because, Billy, to talk about being tormented, I mean, that must have been like a living nightmare for the Shermans living on Skinwalker, right?
Oh, absolutely. They were being tormented by something.
And this is something that you've looked into. It's, there's a lot of kind of different types of stories here. But one of the things that intrigues me anytime I come across it, and I'm lucky enough to have had Linda Moulton Howe on the show, who in my opinion has to be the world's leading kind of investigator into cattle mutilations and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that would go on at the Skinwalker as well, wasn't it? We had the weird mutilations going on, right?
Oh yeah, one of the things that happened to them is one day they decided they were going to go out and tag the calves' ears because over the last few days a lot of calves had been born. So they were out there and they got to the first set of calves, which was a calf and the mom, and they tagged his ear and everything, and they continued on further down the ranch, probably I think maybe about 100 yards, 150 yards to go do the other ones. And about 45 minutes later, it was Terry and Gwen and their dog. About 45 minutes later, the dog starts acting really weird. It starts growling and the hackles are raised, and it's out looking towards the their home and where the other, the calf that they had tagged. And then all of a sudden it ran away. And from one of the stories I heard about it, they never got the dog back. The dog disappeared. But they went down, they went to go check on what was going on down. They had a full view of everything, and they didn't see anything going on or anything happen, and they didn't hear anything. So they go down there, and the mother cow was pacing back and forth, and it was limping on one of its legs. And it was doing like this weird, like semicircle, pacing back and forth, and it was very upset. So then they see the calf there, and it was like gutted. There was all its insides were gone. It was laying there like spread eagle, and you could see down into the spine, into the ribs, and all the insides were gone. There wasn't any blood, any like inside body parts laying on the ground. It was just completely dry. And and this was the time when Robert Bigelow owned it, and he had his NIDS team there. So they ended up calling the NIDS team. They were over in Las Vegas for a couple of days, and they got over there within a couple of hours, and they started investigating it, and found out that like the rib cage, the bones on it were like perfect cuts, like it was cut by a super sharp machete. And the ear that had the tag on it was cut off, and it was like cut perfectly with a scalpel. And they have no explanations on what happened. They actually think that the calf itself was killed someplace else, picked up and just dropped there, kind of gently dropped there, the way the legs were spread out and almost like ceremoniously.
It's weird. All of these, it's the one thing that these stories have in common, the fact that they're all uniquely weird in their own way.
Yes.
And you've mentioned NIDS a couple of times. And for people out there who might not know who this is, it's the National Institute for discovery of science, and it was Robert Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace. I've spoke about him on the show in ref program at the Pentagon, which we'll get into later on. It ties into this. But he ran this between 1995 and 2004. And that's the thing, they really were doing a lot of scientific research at the property. Only problem being, Billy, when it came to the tenure of Bigelow and all of the information, data that they were able to record, I think they keep mentioning it in the current season, but to date, we've not really had full disclosure on everything Bigelow and his team found, have we?
No, we haven't. It's kind of been very under wraps. And what's weird about that is George Knapp, he is like a news broadcaster. I can't remember the name of the station that he works for, but he went there he wanted to write a book about what was going on there. And he's really good friends with Bigelow. So he goes down there and, he's like interviewing people, and he's going around with the teams and stuff during the investigations and stuff. And that was like in 2000. And then after a couple of years, Bigelow had asked him not to like show anything that he's, researching and writing down for the books. He pretty much wanted him to keep it hush hush, because he didn't want people coming, because nosy people go out there and they want to see aliens and they want to witness all of this stuff. So they didn't want any of the experiments kind of messed with. And then finally in 2005, Bigelow let him release the book. Well, he started off, doing a couple things for the newspapers here and there, and then he ended up writing the book. But it's kind of very limited. And even in the documentary Hunt for the Skinwalker that George Knapp did, there's a lot of stuff that he's not willing to talk about because he's promised to talk about it. So I don't know. I think they found some stuff and they just don't want anybody knowing about it.
Well, I definitely think that is, I think you're onto something. And we're going to come back.
Especially after finding out about today's episode.
Yeah.
After watching today's episode.
And we'll come back to that. We'll come back to the Bigelow. We'll come back to that investigation. But talk to us more about the Shermans. What else were they going through, Billy?
The Shermans were kind of plagued by what a lot of people would call like poltergeist activity. And that plays in a lot to the Skinwalker, because the Skinwalker is kind of considered a trickster. It does, trickster type stuff. But they noticed that when they bought the place that all the interior and exterior doors had locks, both, inside and outside of all the doors. All the kitchen cabinet doors were locked. And on either side of the house where the doors were, had these big iron stakes with these long heavy chains. So they seemed to think that they may have even had guard dogs. But the Myers, who were the previous owners, claim that they never had anything happen to them.
Okay, so wait a minute. They claim they never had anything happen to them, but they had their kitchen units, their kitchen cupboards all locked up. They had locks on either side of the doors. That doesn't sound like they were worried about much then.
No, not at all. Nothing to see here.
You see, this is
obviously they were trying to keep something out or keep something in. Obviously,
and it sounds to me like you've got a family, in contrast with the Shermans, who have obviously shared what they went through. The Myers, obviously far more private, not want anything to do with this for whatever reason. And I think, despite them not really talking much about what they went, I would imagine it's on a par with everything we're hearing about the Shermans and what we're going to get into later with what's happening now, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing about the Myers, the Myers owned the ranch from, they bought the ranch and built the first homestead there in 1905. Later on, I think in the 30s, they ended up building the second homestead. But they owned it from 1905 to 1994. So when it had been left abandoned before the Shermans bought it in 1994 for 7 years. So nobody lived there. But back in that time, that's not really stuff that you talked about. You're going to be ridiculed by people. So I think, that had a lot to do with it. They just didn't want to look crazy or whatever.
No, you're right. You have to put it into the context of the times. And I think you're spot on there. Talking about even some of the more less fantastic kind of stuff that you hear about Skinwalker, I'd imagine back then would have had been enough for people to be pointing fingers and nudging
Oh
each other
yeah.
when they see you walking down the street. So yeah, I totally get it. And in some ways, back then we didn't have this amount of information where we could go online and maybe see that paranormal activity happens in many places. And there's a good chance, if you've never been subjected to anything like what you hear goes on at Skinwalker before, then you might literally think you're going mad, Billy.
Oh, absolutely. And if you never heard the stories and lived in the area, because the whole Uinta Valley, they're all used to this kind of stuff. I mean, they've got generations of people witnessing this UFO activity. So much so that the police don't even investigate it anymore, because there's been thousands and thousands of reports over the years about all of this weird UFO activity that happens there. They say that over 50% of the people in the valley have witnessed some form of UFO activity.
Yeah, and even the story I was reading out about that weird entity, it said when they went to the police there, that the kind of reservation police said, "Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
Well, we don't go to Skinwalker. You must be crazy." So
Right?
that shows you just how powerful that story is to the native people there. The fact that law enforcement just write it off. Nope, not going there. Not
But if they were
stepping foot in
actually,
it.
if they were Native Americans, if they were a Ute, they wouldn't step foot on there, because they take this curse very seriously and they won't step foot on the property anyways. So they
Yeah,
won't go there and investigate it for their own beliefs.
yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I don't know how it really works in America, but I'd imagine the reservation police, they would be native
Mm-hmm.
people, right? Yes, so there you go. Then that's why they're not going investigating that. But
Yep.
if we backtrack even a little bit, I forgot to ask you at the time. The cattle mutilations, the weirdness with the animals, be it Skinwalker or anywhere else, what do you make of that, Billy?
I don't know what to make of it, to be honest, because I'm kind of biased in the sense that we always hear cattle mutilations dealing with aliens and
Hmm?
UFOs and stuff. But you put into account, the whole Skinwalker legend and, the creatures that are seen around there. I don't know what to think of it. I'm more apt to think it's a UFO or alien thing going on, because that's what we've heard about for so long.
Yeah, yeah. But, I've never really thought about the Skinwalker itself being responsible, but the claws, why not?
Right.
Absolutely, why not? And
And these things are massive. I don't, they said the calf was like 85
yeah,
pounds. So
yeah,
I don't know if these giant, quote unquote, dire wolves are able to pick up a cow that big and carry, wouldn't be able to bring it back. They wouldn't
yeah.
logically do that, I guess.
And it's some of the stories you hear about that subject in general, it's got to be one of the most bizarre head scratching things you can get into,
Yeah.
because I don't think there's any one definitive answer covers all. I think there's a whole heap of stuff going on. Aliens, paranormal, probably
Yeah.
black ops. I've no idea. But it's one of those things. And again, just one of a number of things that goes on at Skinwalker. And of course, when you look at the area in the Utah Basin, it's very cavernous. There's a lot of caves there. And we often talk on the show, Billy, as well, about how literally, with all the caves and the underground systems and things that are there naturally, without getting into the potential for man made kind of tunnels and things going on, you just never know what's going on underneath
Mm-mm.
Skinwalker as well, right?
Right. Then there's a lot of speculation as to what is, which is something that we'll get into later on.
Absolutely. So, what else with the Shermans then? What else have you
Okay,
got down about them?
let's get to that before I get distracted again.
And I'm bad
Okay.
for distracting people. You should know that by now.
Oh yeah. Okay, so a lot of it is, like I had said, it's kind of like poltergeist activity. Like Gwen had one story, the wife, she had went out and did grocery shopping. She got like 2 weeks worth of groceries and stuff, and she comes home and she puts it up in the cabinets and everywhere it needed to go, and leaves the kitchen area and comes back a little while later, and every piece of grocery, every piece of food that she bought was back in the shopping bags on the counters.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, not good.
No, not good.
Now we can see why the cupboards were locked then, right?
Exactly. Another ad was she went in and took a shower and she brought in her towel and a hairbrush and locked the door. And when she was done with her shower, she gets out and her towel and brush were gone. I'm assuming she found her towel. There's no talk of where that was, but the hairbrush later on was found in the freezer.
You see, that is your very classical poltergeist. But
yep.
Again, the way you described the Skinwalker as a trickster. I mean,
yes.
This potential for possibly some shape-shifting type of energy. I think, that one thing, that curse that was put on that land, whatever that may be, it could be responsible for a lot of what's going on here, right?
I think so. I think the poltergeist activity and some of the stories, because there's so much more that's happened to the Shermans, has more to do with the Skinwalker curse and the UFO aspect of the story.
Give us more of the Shermans then, because I'm quite enjoying these little anecdotes about. Well, I say I'm enjoying it. That's terrible because these people had to live it, and
I know.
That would have been something I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Yeah. Okay, so another thing that would happen is she'd be cooking dinner or lunch or whatever, and she'd turn away, and then her utensil would be gone. And they'd find them in random spots, like inside the microwave. There was one time where their son and a couple of his friends were moving the wood pile about 100 yards closer to the house. And so they, spent the afternoon doing that. And they went in and grabbed something to eat for lunch or whatever and come back out, and all the wood was back where it was.
Oh,
like they hadn't even touched it. Yep. Another incident was they were, I don't know if it was Terry or the son. They were moving fence posts to a different part of the ranch. I'm not sure how far they were doing it, but it took like 4 hours. And same thing, they left and came back, and the posts were exactly where they took them from, within an inch. There was like an inch difference from where they were before.
See, this is again, it's just a plethora of different activity that it all falls under the umbrella. You could put it poltergeist, but at the same time, because of where it is, Skinwalker, poltergeist, same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's weird because it's almost like they're playing mind games with the people that live there, like they're being gaslighted.
And it's
trying to drive them slowly crazy.
There's another kind of weirdness you could look at. And it might tie in with what we're going to get into after the break when we start talking about the current investigation. But when you're talking there, you're talking about the food going into the cupboards and then basically going back to where they were, right? And then you've got the fence posts going back to near enough where they were. The wood pile going back to near enough where they were. There's almost as if it's like some kind of temporal time aspect.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? It's almost like there's a rewind in time going on.
I know. Yeah, I didn't even think of that until you mentioned it.
Quite weird.
Yeah, that's kind of what it seems like.
And if this is a natural vortex, and again, we won't go too far into like what they're investigating now, but I think there's a tie-in in the very latest episode. And that's what got me thinking about this whole time thing.
Yes.
And
well, I've actually got happen when the Shermans were on the farm that kind of tie into that.
Oh, please.
You were saying also.
Go for it.
Okay, so I got one more incident of something moving. Terry was out there digging holes, and he had one of those big post hole diggers. And those things, it's machinery. It's heavy stuff. So he's digging it with a post hole digger and everything. And he looks away, grabs a drink of water, wipes his forehead off or whatever, and turns back around to grab it again. Gone. Totally disappeared. Couldn't find it anywhere. I guess he ended up going out and buying a new one. And then 3 weeks later, they find it. Now, I've heard 30 feet, could have been 75 feet up in a tree.
Whoa.
Yeah. So that's a little different than the other ones because it wasn't placed where it was, but it was placed way up in a tree.
That's just bizarre.
Yeah. So some other incidences that have happened on that farm is shortly after they had moved in there, a man had walked up. He's kind of like this big burly bearded guy comes walking up, and he had heard stories about, you know, some of the stuff that was going on Skinwalker Ranch, and asked if he can go out and meditate to try to connect with whatever's going on. So they say yes. So they drive him to, I want to say it was probably near like Homestead 2, where a lot of the activity was happening. And he's out there meditating, and they're kind of off in the distance, kind of watching them. And they look out into the woods and they see something moving in there. And the only way that it really can be described is it was like kind of invisibly camouflaged, like in the movie Predator.
Yeah, like that shimmering effect.
Yes. And they see this thing kind of, it starts charging this man who's meditating, and the man looks over and he is just horrified by whatever he sees. And that just like freaked him out. So that was another incident that happened there. Another incident was they were coming home from town or whatever, and they see something with the horses. And it was like, they described it as like looking like a hyena, but super like muscly. And it had like kind of reddish curly hair with this big fox, like bushy tail. And so they go run over there, and this thing's like attacking the horses. It's like scratching the horses. And the closer they got, the thing just all of a sudden disappeared. And they clearly weren't just seeing something, because the horses had physical scars on their legs.
You see that's so. This whole it's there 1 minute, gone the next. I mean, how do you logically try and explain that? And I tell you can't logically explain it.
Especially when it's causing physical changes in our reality.
Yeah, it's not like a mass hallucination.
Right.
When the animals have got signs of whatever you have. It's fascinating, but it's also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
I know after the break we're going to start moving into, more recent times and things, but it really does make you wonder what we're dealing with there, whether it's just a skinwalker, whether there's some thinning of the veil between this world and some other dimension.
Right, and that plays into one of the stories that I want to tell you, especially before we go on break.
Go for it.
Okay. So these particular stories, there's a lot of sightings of like these kind of orange orbs up in the sky. And when looked at, you can actually see a different skyline through these orange holes, like they're looking into a different universe. That's been seen several times. And going back to the NIDS investigation, when they were out there investigating, they were out there by Homestead 2, and they see this orange ball floating 4 feet off the ground, and it kind of starts expanding. And one of them puts like their night vision goggles on, or the infrared glasses or whatever, so they can see. And as the hole's getting bigger, he sees these hands coming out, and this creature is crawling out of this orange orb. And they could see in the background of it is different from what the background of, our reality looks like. And it crawls out, and it turns out to be this like 8-foot dark, featureless creature that gets out of the hole, gets onto the ground, and just kind of walks off into the, the tree line or whatever.
Oh, ho, 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 ho. Oh, that should have been the mic drop moment. Damn.
Yeah.
And this is weird, right? Because we watched the latest episode today, and something about this whole looking through what was almost like a window into other dimensions had come up. And it got me really, really thinking. And I'm glad you've brought it up, because I think this is really relevant. I don't know why it's relevant, but I think, this is one of these locations on the planet that, aside from the Skinwalker part, which I think is very, very real, I think there's also something very, very significant going on in the Utah Basin, at the Skinwalker, around Skinwalker, above Skinwalker, under Skinwalker.
Yep.
And like the Bermuda Triangle, Billy, or some of these others, famous kind of triangular areas. You've got the Alaska Triangle, where bajillions of people go missing and not many people talk about. But
Hmm.
there's these locations all over the planet, and for whatever reason, I think Skinwalker finds itself smack bang in the middle of it, where you do
Yes.
get this crossing of worlds, where you do get the ability for these entities and what you described there. And for the audience to think about that, we see such a small slither of the light spectrum. And hey, I'm not knocking it. Take a look around you. Look at the scenery out there in the world. Okay, we can't go out. Look at it on the computer right now. Full of vivid colours and it's beautiful and it's absolutely glorious. But you've always got to keep in mind that we're only seeing so little of what's actually all around us. And then
And
with it,
exactly, because sorry to interrupt, but
oh no, go on, go.
um, you had the guy with the infrared glasses on, but the other guy that was with him didn't have anything on to see, and he saw the orange glowing ball, but he did not see the creature coming out.
Whoa, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere, folks. There we go. We are back. We are live. I was muted up. I almost really messed up. What is a brilliant show so far. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I want to thank our special guest. She's one of our own. I feel almost very proud. I really do. Billijo is here with us today. And are you enjoying yourself, Billy?
I'm having a great time.
You see, that makes my day because so am I. I love getting
Good.
at all of these topics. And last night it was Oak Island with Mannerus. A big shout out to Manny. I see him over in the TFR chat room. And he was asking, is this called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch? And it most certainly is. But there's a bit of a twist because it comes from the same team as The Curse of Oak Island. Now, if you go to the history website, despite the fact that everything on the show is the secret of Skinwalker Ranch, they've actually got it as the curse of Skinwalker Ranch. So I don't know what the show's called anymore. It's absolutely fantastic. We're going to get
It's a
into
Mandela effect.
it. Might well be a Mandela effect in the making. If it's not, we'll make it one. But just the guy, just be happy. He goes by the name of now. He says Billijo is on fire. She certainly is. She's loving it. I'm loving it. I hope you're all loving it out there. And Billy, let's get into more of some of the things that have happened at Skinwalker. Bring it up to date and we get into this amazing show.
Okay.
So what else has been happening on the ranch?
All right. So some other things that have been happening is there's a lot of strange birds that show up there that don't belong in that area, kind of like almost like tropical exotic birds they see there. And there's been instances of, I don't know if you get this over in Scotland, but over here we've got like our Canadian geese. And when they start to migrate down south, they go down forming V's.
Yeah.
When they're doing this, once they get over the ranch, they kind of like dissipate. They lose their formation and some actually fall to the ground. It's almost like they're hitting some kind of like invisible barrier or pillar or something.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that'll probably tie in with some of the stuff that is happening now, when we get into that aspect of it. So have you got any other stories you want to get out there? Because for the audience out there, Billijo has been working tirelessly on this. And I don't want to waste any of her research. You know how when Nano Girl comes on, I'm very conscious of the time and effort she puts in. I'm very conscious of that again tonight. So, Billy, I don't want to lose any of these little stories and anecdotes you've put together for us. What else has been going on there that you think's relevant?
All right, I'll try to hurry so that we can get onto the show.
Oh, we've got plenty of time. We've still got an hour to go. We're jamming.
Okay. So another thing is they had gone out somewhere on the ranch, and it was one morning they woke up and they noticed there's like dozens of these scoops out of the land, like these big holes that looked like they might have been dug by a excavator or a backhoe or something, just littering. They have no idea. It was hundreds of pounds of dirt were coming out of these holes, and those just appeared. They don't remember hearing any machinery or anything going on through the night.
Something coming in and taking like core samples out of the ranch?
But they were big. They were big holes. I can't remember the dimensions of it, but enough to like a backhoe bucket.
Wow.
Size. Yeah.
So almost like sinkhole type things going on.
Kind of, but they were like, from the pictures that I saw, they looked like they might have been 2 or 3 feet in circumference and probably maybe like a foot down. So
Ah,
a good chunk of dirt was taken out, but they weren't like super deep.
it does sound like a sample though. It sounds almost like something scientific if you were taking like a sample across an area. That's
Yeah,
weird. And
exactly. But
yeah.
they didn't hear any type of machinery out there doing it through the night.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
So, and you'll like this one. There's been reports of a family of Bigfoot out there.
Right, hang on. You're adding Bigfoot into the mix as well.
Yes.
Now, I hadn't come across
Yes.
any of this today. I hadn't come across this, but I'm not surprised. But tell us, what kind of Bigfoot kind of
That
witnesses reports do we have?
that was the only thing that I heard, and some of the stuff that was going on was that a family of Bigfoot have been spotted in the area several times. There's
Well,
no story that went along with it. There was just
that's
one
bizarre.
of the
And if you
things.
think about it, right? If you think about it, then you got the Skinwalker, and we've got this thing that appears as the big wolf at times.
Yeah.
We've got the thing with the big red eyes. We've got that thing with the wings and the horns and the red eyes. You know, why not? I mean, if you've got everything else there, there's a part of me wonders what the Bigfoot is when you find it in its natural habitat out in the
Yeah.
forests and things. And I do think there's something interdimensional to it. So
Yeah,
if
I do
that's the
too.
case, yeah, if that's the case, then why not have it something that can change shape? Maybe it appears as one thing one time. I don't know how it works, but I'm definitely very open to that.
Well, a lot of people reports the skinwalkers as being like these wolf-like humanoids. They, that stand up on 2 feet. So if in fact that's what they were seeing, it could have been mistaken as what we consider a Bigfoot. Is, because I'm assuming that they probably saw them off in a distance or whatever. But if they see this hairy creature standing up on 2 feet, whether it be a Bigfoot or being this quote unquote wolf man,
The
you never know.
Wolfman. Oh, the
I mean,
Wolfman is Skinwalker Ranch. I can feel it now, Billy. We could put together some kind of film or something like that.
right?
I don't know, but see, now
Well,
you've
I've got
kind of
another Wolfman story.
you've
There's
thrown
so
me off.
many
I'm
stories.
still kind of weirded out by the fact that we've got big feet there now as well. But yeah, go for it. Another Wolfman. Tend to call them at times as well the dog men. I suppose
Yep.
you could go full werewolf, right?
Yeah. So there were the two native cops. I'm assuming from the Ute tribe. They were out driving. They were close to the ranch, and they see these 2 men standing there with these long trench coats, and they're smoking cigarettes. And so they stopped to figure out what they were doing, and they shined the light on them, and they turned around, and they had wolf faces.
Oh,
Yeah. So they're sitting in their car, and they look at each other like, "What the heck is that?" And they turn back, and they were gone, but their cigarettes were laying on the ground, burning.
oh, get out of here! No way! I've just got the heebie-jeebies, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not
And
good.
here's another instance of trickster activity. So from watching the show, they have those dog runs where the big pens where they would put the cat and they got the
Yeah, yeah,
watchtowers.
absolutely, yeah.
So those were built because they wanted to have cows and dogs out there as biosensors because they can typically sense things when we can't. So they got those all built up, and they would put the dogs in there, and they'd turn around, and the thing would come undone, the lock would come undone, or however they, close the gate, and the dogs would escape. And this happened multiple times to the point where they put deadbolts on the fence to keep them in, and the deadbolts would disappear, and the dogs would get let out. Yeah.
Couldn't make all of this stuff up. You really couldn't. And it does sound, to some people that aren't into our woo, you might be thinking, oh, this is all too fantastic. I tell you need to check this place out for yourself. And with this program being on just now, what better time to dive down the most weirdest of rabbit holes that Skinwalker surely presents.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing for the skeptics out there is that a lot of this stuff has been witnessed by scientists.
Yeah.
They from like the NIDS team, they had scientists and investigators and, people with PhDs and stuff out there witnessing this and documenting it. So it's not just, woohoo stories from crazy people. It's being documented, stuff that we don't know about because they won't release it. But
yeah, and people talking about George Knapp as well, doing shows on it. And we were speaking about George Knapp during the break. I think I might try and reach out to him. It'd be a dream to get him on the show and talk about these subjects. But
That would be awesome.
it really would be awesome. Now, we've had Bigelow. He had the ranch. You mentioned there how when he had it, it really was a kind of a scientific experiment going on there. Various things. They built up the watchtowers, the observation towers, like you say. And it sounds look exactly like they sound, folks. Think of like a prison guard watchtower on the fence, just something like that, so they could observe what was going on the mesa with the cattle, etc. And what really interests me about the whole Bigelow association with the ranch is the fact that a lot of the information they say, again, I've got no way of verifying this, but I've got no reason to doubt it either, because Bigelow's got ties to the government, and we know that through the ATIP program. And a lot of the information that they got there, whatever it was, it doesn't just remain like locked up in Bigelow's safe. It's literally national security. It's been given a kind of confidential kind of stamp on it. So that does really make you wonder, what on earth was it that Bigelow, the NIDS team, etc., just what kind of data there, what phenomenon did they record? What did they prove to themselves? What did they find? And that's why I'm really, really, really excited, Billy, because Bigelow doesn't have the ranch anymore. And in 2016, a guy that I think we both are fans of already. We don't know much about him, but what we've seen, we're very, very on board with him. It's a guy called Brandon Fugel, and he is the head of Adamantium Holdings. It's a really weird word, and you know what I'm like with reading. But he's basically a millionaire / billionaire. He bought the ranch for $4.5 million. And much like Bigelow, Billy, he's wanting to find out what's going on Skinwalker, isn't he?
Yes.
And as opposed to hiding it all away or not showing anyone what you're finding out, what's going on there, they've literally made it like a reality show / documentary where we're getting a fly on the wall journey, experience, look into everything going on at Skinwalker Ranch now. And if people thought that the stuff that we've already spoke about was pretty woo, I think in 5 episodes so far, I can't think of a more woo-filled, mystery-filled show that I've ever seen before. Because the information, the phenomenon, the stuff that's happening, talk about full-on, Billy. It is insane.
Oh, it's crazy.
And you've fallen in love with this show as well. My good friend ZX, he was up till 5 a.m. in the morning. He probably blames me because I threw him down the Skinwalker rabbit hole. Talk to the audience about what's going on now at Skinwalker and with all this good stuff that they're uncovering.
Okay, now, if I'm not mistaken, aren't you guys over there a couple weeks behind us in the season?
Well, what we'll do is, right, I'll shift gears, right? You're going to hear a weird noise in a minute.
How dare you?
Right, now you're talking to Dave Baker. And Dave Baker lives in a virtual world, where in a virtual world, possibly, I live in the US, or at least my IP address thinks I do. And I watch the episodes online in virtual form, and then I go back to, you know, that idiot Kev that hosts this show. I go back to him, I tell him what was happening, and that keeps him up to date. So with that said, I'm going to play the trigger word again, and you'll get Kev back, right?
How dare you?
Well, that's the end of Dave. I'm back now, Billy. I don't know what he was telling you, but yeah, hypothetically speaking, I could be right on the same episode.
Perfect, because I didn't want to give you any spoiler alerts.
Well, you know, we're not going to give too many spoilers. It probably is because some people probably haven't watched any yet. But listen, folks, if you are intending to watch it, how about you just switch off the episode now and you can come back and listen to it once you've dived down the rabbit hole. I think that's a fair disclaimer to put on it because we are going to be talking about some of the things that we've seen. And again, I just want to emphasize to anyone out there who wants to see this firsthand, they don't want to have any kind of woo aha moments taken from them. please, please, please tune out now, or just stick your fingers in your ears and go, nah, 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 Kev Baker show's great, nah, nah, nah. I don't know what you want to do right now, but Billy, talk to us. Skinwalker Ranch, the secrets of it. I can't speak highly enough of it. But what do you
I
make
know.
of it?
Fantastic show, and I love the fact that they're bringing like scientific devices to be able to measure everything that they're measuring, and just bring like a scientific aspect to it to show that this just isn't, woo or whatever. So yeah, that's what I really like about this. In this particular show, of course, he said Brandon Fugel owns it, and he's got his team of experts. He's got another scientist that comes in, Jim. I can't pronounce his last name. Sigler?
It's like Selas or some. I don't know. The other
something like that.
Easier. Travis Taylor's far easier, right?
Yes, Travis Taylor. He's the astrophysicist, which Oak Island fans will remember him coming on there, and that you spoke about. And he's got 25 years experience in all of this stuff. So he really knows what he's talking about. Ranch superintendent, and he's the guy who has the physical stuff that happens to him. Eric Brand is the principal investigator. Again, Jim, the scientist, whatever his last name is. You got Jim Morse, which is the ranch manager, and you got Bryant, the Dragon Arnold, who is the security officer. And this is the team that comes and goes, they hire experts to come in and do their scientific experiments and stuff.
And to really, the first episode, I mean, you're talking about Travis Taylor. Now, Travis Taylor, in his own right, is a very accomplished astrophysicist. He has done a number of shows. He's a good personality. I like to watch him. He's been on the Tesla Files. He's been on Oak Island, like Billy said. And he's coming from a very, very scientific world. He's coming from a very nuts and bolts kind of perspective, hands-on. You need to be able to prove it. Have contracts still with the Department of Defense. I like to compare him to a young version of Dr. Richard Allen Miller, because Richard Allen Miller would have been doing similar kind of stuff in his contracts when he was connected to the government. And when he gets told or he gets asked to go to Skinwalker, you're talking about somebody who isn't listening to the Kev Baker show. And that's not to knock him. He's absorbed in his science, and he's a science guy. And when he's hearing stories about apparitions appearing and disappearing and all the stuff that we've just gone over in the past hour and 15 minutes, it's no lie to say, is it, Billy, that Travis, to start with, I mean, he's basically rolling his eyes in his head, looking at them like they're mad, right?
Right. And he, up until a certain point in the series, he didn't even believe that UFOs existed.
Nope.
So, yeah, he's very scientific in his approach.
As my son pointed out, he says, Dad, it's only taken him like 1.5 episodes to be absolutely confused to the point where he looks like you and you're doing Freaky Friday.
Well, he was very confused in the first episode, and you'll see this throughout the different episodes. They're measuring for radio frequencies, radio radiation and stuff, and they got their tri-field meters, and they're out there along the ridge, and they're measuring for radiation and stuff, and they noticed that the higher they put the tri-field meter, the higher reading they would get, to the point where they got all the way up to the top, and it was measuring at like right around 200 parts per second or something, however the measurements go. And so he was totally baffled by that, because typically when you get those kind of radiations, the densest part of it's down by the ground, and it kind of, pushes out as it goes up.
A lot of talk right now about millimeter wave and frequencies and ionizing radiation and stuff like that. And literally, like Billy's explaining here, the higher up they were going, the more and more of this electromagnetic frequencies they were experiencing, to the point where it was getting borderline dangerous at one point, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
And there's nothing in the area that can account for the kind of signals that they are picking up and they're recording and this was just in the summer of last year, all around this property to the point where, with some of the frequencies, you hear some of the people, some of the stories. It's on the show as well, but from time to time, people almost get dizzy, vertigo. And again, these frequencies, we hear about targeted individuals and things and how they can be manipulated by specific frequencies. And I think some of the frequencies that are going there, Billy, I think that's probably having this physical effect on people where it's literally making them feel ill, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just like you said. But one thing they did mention is that further down, and I think it was like Arizona, Nevada, is where they did the test sites for the Manhattan Project when they were dropping the atomic bombs. And they were saying that some of the nuclear fallout traveled over the ranch, like 30 miles past the ranch.
Yeah.
And they kind of wonder if a lot of that radiation is still like in the dirt, but that does not explain why it's like higher up. And it moves. It doesn't just go higher. The radiation kind of moves around. They'll be kind of searching with their tri-field meter, trying to figure out where it's coming from because it moves around so much.
And then, we're not going to give anything away here. There's no spoiler because this is basically the trailer for the show. But because they're detecting these energies, they decide to do like a night vigil, and they go out and they camp out on the mesa. And this is where they capture something that is absolutely, and I'm not saying this lightly, folks. I think it could be some of the most interesting phenomenon that's been captured live and shown on a mainstream show. And it's the beam of light that night when they spend the time outside, Billy, when they notice the beam of light, almost emanating from the mountain, right? And then there's the mountain itself, it almost starts glowing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. And what was even weirder about it is they couldn't see. They just happened to look, because they had a whole thing set up. They set up camp there and they had their equipment and everything. And they had this big TV to show the infrared. And they noticed it on the infrared, but when they looked at it, they didn't see the beams of light with their own eyes. They could see the sky lighting up and the ridge kind of lighten up a little bit, but they were really seeing it on the screen with the infrared cameras.
And folks, this was like you see sometimes photoshopped images and people like me taking a photograph of the Great Pyramid over in Egypt and maybe putting a light beam coming out where the capstone is. This is literally what it looked like on top of that mountain, just a big beam of light going straight up. And this is where it started to get a bit dangerous because one of the people on the ranch, Billy, I mean, as this phenomenon's happening, he basically suffers. Not the first time it's happened to him, is it?
No, the first time it happened to him, and I'm trying to figure out where I wrote his name down. The first time it happened to him, let's go back a little bit. They don't like digging on the property.
Oh,
and,
yeah, this is quite funny.
Yeah, when the Shermans originally bought the property from the Myers, it was written in the contract that if they decided to dig there, they would contact the Myers first. So digging on the property, as they've been kind of hesitant about it. So this particular guy, I wish I could find where I wrote his name.
Definitely.
Okay, Tom, yes.
Yep.
So Tom he thought it was, stupid. So he went out with his little tractor and he starts digging. Well, shortly after that, he starts getting like this little egg-shaped knot in the back of his head, which ultimately turned into, he ended up in the emergency room and his scalp was pulling away from his skull.
Yep.
And he was in the hospital for like a week. And then when they were out there this last time that you were talking about, it started happening again.
Yeah, it was almost as if it was connected to the phenomenon because of the timing. As they were picking this up, he starts feeling ill. And this is something you see through the series, even the skeptic, Travis, they go to a cave at one point, and he himself, it's not the only time, there's a couple of times without giving too much away, but he feels the effects of whatever it is that's going on this place. And, people, this was something really serious. The doctors couldn't explain it. They show you the x-ray of it. And literally the guy's scalp had separated from his skull. And at one point,
Well,
they described it like a radiation, almost like he was shot with radiation, isn't it?
yeah. The scientist that's there on the team now was actually the first time when he was in the hospital. He was called in to have a look at it, and that's what he said. He had no explanation other than it looked like a beam of radiation hit him from a particular angle onto his scalp.
And we are almost on the break. And when we come back after the break, we'll get into a couple of other things. But then myself and Billy are going to set sail and take you to Speculation Island, because there might be something far more significant going on with this show. And it might tie in with stuff that I've covered, some people will say to the point of ad nauseum, to do with disclosure.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm really glad that you've picked up on this as well, Billy. And we're going to give you more kind of stuff that's going on there, but then we're going to kind of give you our thoughts on what may or may not be going on here. It's a really entertaining show, but it's a program. Are we being programmed? We'll be back after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You know, we're moving into the final part of today's show, and probably could do with a 3-hour show, maybe even a 4-hour show. But we will try and cram in as much as we can before the end. I want to thank Billy Joe really profusely, because when I just kind of threw it out there, you know, I'd said to Billy a couple of times, we'll need to get her on. She's called into the show before, but when I realised we both had really fallen head over heels with this new show, I thought, yeah, I'll get Billy on to hang out and we'll talk about it. And, you know, I maybe thought we would maybe get an hour out of it. But, Billy, I have to take my hat off to you. You're like a seasoned guest. You've come with more information than we would ever require. And on behalf of the audience and myself here, I can't thank you enough, because I've been dying to talk about this at length. And well, this has panned out to be really, really worth my time. I hope everyone else appreciates it. You've given up your time, not only today, but putting together all these notes for the show as well. So I'm really made up for you, because I'm sure the audience are going to want to hear more from you in the future.
Oh, absolutely.
Good stuff, good stuff. So, listen, we were getting into the current day show that's on the TV right now. And one of my good friends, Spooky Andy, in one of the other segments, he was talking something about time slips going on and dimensional shifts, dimension shifting across one another, and that's why stuff goes missing and shows up in different places, meaning one world could have a different outcome than another. Now, spoiler alert again. If you haven't watched the series, now would be a good time to go make a cup of tea, because I want to get into this latest experiment hypothesis that they have. And the only reason I want to jump forward to get this, Billy, is because Andy had brought this up, and I says to him, oh, just you hold your horses. We'll get to that bit in good time, right? So we've had all of the weirdness where the shopping and stuff, things moving around, all of this anomalies going on. And you've got Travis Taylor there, this guy who's trying to use science to tackle what's going on. Now, we were talking about the energies and everything else that they were picking up on, the EMF, and how it appeared the signal got stronger as you go higher. Well, there's a whole heap of experiments they do. They send rockets up, and the phenomenal stuff that happens when that's going on. Again, it could be a historic first, in my opinion. It's some of the most compelling footage of something. I urge the listeners to check that out. But it all culminates in Travis coming up with a hypothesis that I think might just explain the whole being able to see from one world into the next, and a whole heap of the stuff going on there. And what he talks about is, what if, and remember, it's a hypothesis, we don't know, none of these things have ever been found. They're only ever speculated about. But what about some kind of wormhole being on the property or just above the property? Because this energy, it all focuses up to about a mile up in the sky. And when you look at the basin, it's almost like a parabolic dish. It almost focuses this energy. And the whole kind of time aspect of things, the wormhole aspect of things, I mean, Billy, what did you make of that?
I can't even tell you how excited I was when he said wormholes.
Yep.
I was like, because I'm a big multi-dimensions and then hearing the stories of these orange balls where you could see into like an alternate reality and creatures and stuff coming out. I was so excited. I was so happy he brought that up because I believe that's a big part of it.
I do. And whether we call it a vortex or whether we call it a wormhole or whether we call it a portal, I think we don't have the right kind of lecture to the right language even maybe to describe what this whole thinning of the veil seen into another dimension, what the mechanics of that truly is. The wormhole, like Travis says in the show, it's theoretical, and could it be something like that? I literally think we're looking at one of the most active vortexes on the planet, where entities come and go, where craft come and go, where everything you can imagine that you would put in the paranormal UFO type kind of topics, it's all happening there. And that takes us to the show itself and what's going on right now. Because I've seen people in the chat rightly raising an eyebrow when I mentioned that Travis Taylor has ties to the government, Department of Defense. Now, for me, that doesn't necessarily make him a bad person. It makes him somebody that's in the know, albeit compartmentalized. And we've got a lot of stuff happening in just a few episodes. Like a lot of stuff happening. Now, we have to step back and put that into context with what else is going on. And in particular, what else is going on the History Channel. Because, like I said, not once but twice, I think we've seen historic type stuff. First time ever captured and mainstream audience coming from this new Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. And at the same time, and there's a connection between the two, we've got a TV show called Unidentified on the History Channel. And I say there's a connection between the two because Unidentified is basically the To the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge, Louis Elizondo, Hal Puthoff, that crowd there and their disclosure, and they're connected to Skinwalker through the ATIP program. Now, the ATIP program was that UFO research investigation that the Pentagon were running between 2007 and 2012, I believe. And Louis Elizondo came out in December 2017, and it was the world's media all of a sudden changed the way they started talking about the whole subject of UFOs. Now, most recently, we've had the Pentagon coming out and confirming that one of the videos that the ATIP and To the Stars Academy have shown is absolutely genuine. So we've got this Skinwalker Ranch showing us things we've never seen before. Phenomenon that usually would have been ridiculed. Never have got to see it on mainstream TV anyway, that's for sure. We've got Unidentified going on. We've also got Project Blue Book, another show on history that talks about the Project Blue Book. I've not watched that show yet. Billy's got a bit on that in a moment. But what myself and Billy were kind of throwing back and forth before the show is, and this is in no way to pour water on it or make it a bad thing, I think there's something bigger going on here. And I think some of the things that we're already seeing in Skinwalker Ranch and with the government scientists there to almost kind of add that layer of credibility, should it need it, then I think we're seeing some soft disclosure. We're seeing some new physics. We're seeing some new science. We're in a new world now. Because at the same time, Billy, you've got that Unidentified show. And for anyone who hasn't watched that, I've only seen one episode. And they're literally going to Capitol Hill. They've got Christopher Mellon going into meetings with congressmen and everything else. And some of the meetings they're having are with people with the blacked out faces in offices near Capitol Hill and things. It's literally like controlled disclosure going on in front of our eyes right now. And part of me thinks Skinwalker ties in with it. But what do you think? Do you think there's an aspect to that?
Yeah, I definitely do. You know, the whole soft disclosure thing, they're letting this out.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it is.
same here.
You know, I haven't watched The Unidentified yet, which is something I have on my list to watch, and hearing you talk about it, I'm definitely going to start.
Well, I'd
But
put it
then
off
you've got,
because I'd only put it off because it was Tom DeLonge and
right.
Elizondo, and I've done shows on them and I'm quite wary about their ties to the government. They're almost like a kind of front shop or a front company for the CIA and the people who have been keeping all of this secret in the first place. But
Mm-hmm.
now, you watch the show, the one episode I've seen, it really did. It made me sit back and pay attention. And then I start thinking about it. You got all this stuff that we've never seen before. I mean, there's a UFO that gets captured on Skinwalker Ranch, the TV show, isn't there, Billy? I mean, they
Yes,
capture
two.
it. A mass sighting. There's like numerous people there. They've got it on camera. And they're literally, instead of, it used to be that would play weird music on the back of it, even on documentaries like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now, this is like, yeah, here you go. Take a look at that. There's a UFO responding to what we're doing.
Right.
That's a different attitude altogether.
Right. And the way it came about is you didn't even expect it, because it was during their rocket experiment, and they were getting set up. You know, they did the first one, and then as they were getting set up for the second one, they just happened to look up and boom, there it was.
And
In
here's
the
this
same,
guy, yeah, and here's this guy, the astrophysicist, doesn't believe a thing to do with UFOs. And then he's
yeah, he's
sitting
like,
there,
I never even believed in UFOs, but yet I think I just saw one.
I've seen two now in one day because it came back
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And I do, and again, it's not to take away from the show, but I do think we're being showing things in the show that start to advance the conversation and what technologies we might have as well. Because how
Mm-hmm.
much do you think maybe there's an underground aspect to what's going on at Skinwalker? It's been talked about on the show. You mentioned the digging and the
Yep.
security guard Dragon, he goes by the name of. He's comical. He's like a
He's
superstitious.
a drama queen.
Yeah, he's like a superstitious old woman. He like almost starts crying anytime anyone talks about like even digging an inch. But
Yeah, he gets visibly upset. It's so funny to watch.
it's truly
And
funny.
then Travis is there kind of rolling his eyes at him, being like, you are being so ridiculous.
I know. And again, it just feels to me like there's something more going on there. And this
Mhm.
underground thing, do you think, and again, we're going to be speculating here, but it's not impossible that we've got bases underneath places like Skinwalker Ranch, because
Yes.
you hear about the deep underground military bases. You said yourself it's not a million miles away from the testing grounds in Nevada and things. Do you think maybe some of the signals that they're picking up too, maybe that's emanating from underground? What do you think? Could it be ours?
I think so. I think anything that's going on underground is ours. They've been working with UFOs and stuff ever since like Roswell. And, if in fact these UFOs and aliens are real, there's a lot of speculation that the government is working with these aliens. So it could be projects that are going on with both of them together.
How about an alien base then?
It's very possible, because, you've got these reports of UFOs coming out of the ocean
Mm-hmm.
and flying into the ocean, which, if you get into the whole hollow earth thing, chances are there's civilizations down there. So who knows?
Oh, Billy, now you're talking my language. And there's another show that ties in with the soft disclosure. It ties in with Skinwalker, and it's called Project Blue Book. You were telling me they covered this story, and there's a lot of connections to everything we've been talking tonight, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah, this particular episode here, as any of you know that watch the show, they do an episode per file, I guess you could call it. And this particular one was, the Skinwalker. And this aired back in March. And, a lot of the aspects that they show on the show tie into the stories that have happened to the Shermans. seeing the wolf, just different weird things that happen around the house and everything. And the Air Force went out there with Dr. Hynek and investigated it. They called Project Blue Book themselves. It wasn't the Sherman family per se in the particular episode. It was a different family. And the circumstances around it were different. Took place in the 50s when the Myers would have owned the place. So I don't know if this was actually the Meyer family who had called Project Blue Book to have them come out and investigate whatever was going on there.
That'd be quite interesting if it was, especially since they never talked about what was going on there as well. I wonder if they were told not to talk.
Right. And like I said, the Myers owned the ranch from 1905 to, whenever the Shermans bought it in 1994. So it ties in. The date times in.
Well, it absolutely does. Now, you were telling me about something where there are in underground caverns or something in the show as well, are they not?
Yes. So at the end of the episode, incidents that happened revolved around their young son. And towards the end of it, the boy disappears and they can't find him. So they get looking in this closet where earlier in the episode, the boy had disappeared and he was in this closet. So they get looking and they see this hidden doorway that they break open. And Dr. Hynek, and it was Captain Michael Quinn, and he's with the Air Force that investigates all of these files and stuff. They go down and they find like this man-made tunnel, with all the bricks, and it's got plumbing and everything going down it. And they actually come into, Officer Quinn ended up coming in contact with this monster down there that looks like a skinwalker. But he ends up following these tunnels, and it comes into like this other building. And apparently, according to what this story tells, is the Air Force hired scientists to study the tectonic strain, which are the forces generating on the thin Earth's crust, which can compromise anomalous luminous phenomenon, which are lights in the sky, these little orbs and stuff that everybody are seeing. They've been working in the caverns below the ranch, drilling down and directing high-powered water mixture into fault lines, pretty much making earthquakes. And they're examining a possible connection to tremors and reports of UFOs. And apparently when the earth shakes, packets of ethylene gas come up through the ground, from below ground up through the ground, and can become exposed, causing different like hallucinations and stuff, sensing things, hearing things, seeing things, visual hallucinations.
Yeah, because you sometimes get those earthquake lights that you sometimes see in the sky before it happens.
Yeah.
You get electricity of the plates rubbing together as well. It's interesting that they throw that in an episode of Project Blue Book.
Right, and I don't know if this...
Ranch.
Yeah, and I don't know if this actual bunker was like underground or the tunnels kind of reached to a different building. But the woman that was a scientist said they were researching the use of this gas as a weapon. And you kind of get investigating this this ethylene gas, and it's in mustard gas, which we all know what mustard gas does.
Not good.
Not good.
No, not good at all. No, absolutely not.
That was their, Project Blue Book's explanation for the phenomenon that was happening on Skinwalker Ranch. It was like hallucinations caused by this ethylene gas.
So, Billy, with Skinwalker Ranch, with Unidentified, with Project Blue Book, with change the way the media report on these types of things, ATIP to the Stars Academy, the Pentagon coming out confirming UFO videos, UAP videos,
UAP now.
unidentified aerial phenomenon. You got to get the new language right. What do you think's going on here? I mean, are they going to tell us the truth? Are they going to finally bring us up to speed? Is there an agenda, or are they programming us for, dare I say it, Project Bluebeam?
That's exactly what I was going to say, because, I found out about Project Bluebeam years ago, and I've been telling everybody, In the next 10 years, expect there to be some kind of alien invasion because of Project Bluebeam. And I think that's kind of what they might be getting us ready for.
That, or they're really on their way in. Ooh, you never
Yes.
know. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, all of it's really speculation on our part.
Oh, speculation is the place to be, Billy. You should know by
Yes.
now that that's where
I love Speculation Island.
Speculation Island is a really cool place to hang
Yes,
out.
it is.
But we've got about 10 minutes left. So what else do you want to throw out there about Skinwalker from your extensive notes that you've got there?
I think I kind of pretty much covered all the notes that I
Did we
had.
get through them? You see, that for me is mission accomplished if we got through them.
Yep, there's a lot. I really didn't think I was going to get through the whole 2 hours, but I managed it.
So if you could go to Skinwalker yourself, I mean, would you go?
I don't know. I would love to go to kind of experience it, but I have this weird fear of aliens. And I'd be afraid that I would see one, because lots of times at night, I won't even look up in the sky because I'm really afraid I'm going to see a UFO.
I must admit, when it comes to Skinwalker, when I was sitting watching it today with Kevin, I'm thinking to myself, all the things that can happen there have happened there.
Yep.
I wouldn't like to be there myself. That's all I'm saying. I would definitely go there, but I wouldn't like to go myself. And, before we go, there's one last really weird thing I want to get into you with. And it comes in, I think it's one of the houses where the team are staying now. And there's obviously what they describe as like poltergeist activity. There's noises coming from down in the basement. Your stereotypical Bill Bean type of situation that he would go into. And then they go down into the basement and it's the weirdest of things.
Yes.
Tell the audience what's in this basement, Billy.
Well, the team came out to kind of, see what was going on down in the basement. And for some reason, one of them ended up in the cement wall, which was, I don't know, pretty thick, at least, 6 inches, maybe even thicker. So he pokes a hole in there and gets looking, and there is a room in there. And it's completely sealed off. They have no idea what it was for. It's just the weirdest thing ever.
There's no way into this concrete box. There's no way out of it. The walls on the inside are very perfectly smooth. And like I say, this is in the basement under the house, and it's just this concrete block, an enclosure. And like Billy says, this is some heavy duty concrete. They've made this thing to contain something and to keep it in. And I have got no idea. And inside it, it's like there's the ashes. Something's been burnt inside it. But there's no way in. It's like
this little pile of dusty stuff.
There's no way in. There's no way out. There's no smoke. And then when they look at it under a microscope, it's got like hairs on it. They think there's little bones in it. It's the most bizarre. I say it's the most bizarre thing ever, but I suppose it's right in line for everything Skinwalker. And I've got no idea how this ties in with what's going on there.
I don't either.
I think it's got a relevance. I don't know if the Myers maybe put it there. I've got no idea. It's almost as if it was put there to contain something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like a giant.
But what? I mean, there's no evidence other than that little pile. There's no evidence of anything being in there. There's no watermarks. There's no stains or anything on any of the cement.
See, this is me. I'm going to start ripping my hair out again. And folks, I have got a lot of hair. Let me tell you, I look like a Sasquatch. If I don't get a barber shop soon, I think I might have a cryptid. You'll probably see pictures of me walking through Glasgow. Look, we've seen a Bigfoot. It's getting ridiculous, Billy. And before we go away, I mean, are you managing to stay sane in the lockdown?
Yes. Fortunately, over here, unlike you guys, we're able to get out whenever we want. We don't have limits on how much time we can spend in our yard.
Yard time, I'm telling you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we could be out there all day if we want. It's no problem taking our dogs out for walks or our kids out. We can get out. We can drive around.
Well, remember,
so we do have some sort of freedom.
Remember, you phoned in to the show about when Bill Bean was on, and you were asking about the mark of the beast and stuff like that, and we were talking about the quantum dot tattoo. Yeah. I'll throw this bit of woo out there for you people. Listen, I'm 99% certain that none of this will actually connect. But there are people that have been putting two and two together, and they've been looking at this. And these quantum dot tattoos, this medical record that we're going to have under our skin in the near future, possibly. Well, there's something else that they can put under your skin that does have a kind of a visual effect, a glowing effect. And I tell you what, if I was going to write the plot for some apocalyptic pandemic / moving into a weird world order, you know, I would definitely go down the road of using what I heard about today and what I found out, because there's an enzyme out there, right? And they're using it in science, that they're working with it, you know, in a whole host of different things. But this enzyme has a really miraculous kind of quality to it. And it literally glows in the dark. It's bioluminosity, right? And this bioluminous enzyme that they're talking about, you literally couldn't make the name of this up. Now, bear in mind, you know, we're living at a time when we've got patent number 666 and a whole host of other woo stuff going on, and a lot of talk about the mark of the beast. Now, remember, I emphasize, this is not even speculation. It's the plot of my new book. But if I was going to include the quantum dot tattoo in my new book about this fictional world that we're living in, I would probably say that the way that this dot is able to be seen from under the skin would be to include an enzyme that goes by the name of, are you ready for this, folks? Luciferase. Yes, indeed. Luciferase. Luciferase. A bioluminous enzyme that will glow on. It's not what they're going to use, right? Because that would be just too ridiculous. I've had a blast tonight with Billy. Go and check out Luciferase. I don't lie, folks. I'm not making it up. And again, I'm not saying it's happening, but in my weird world, stranger things have happened.